So you've written a great mystery and you want to end it with a bang. You want the reader to wind up gobsmacked by your sleuth's incredible cleverness and eager to read the next book. Well, I've got a tactic for you that is just really going to take that ending to the next level. It's called the Sleuth's Trap, and it's what savvy sleuths do when they're down to the wire. A sleuth's trap is any ploy your detective uses to fool the villain into sealing his own fate. Our first technique for executing one is to get the villain to admit to revealing knowledge. That is, something only the real killer should know. This might be what the murder weapon looked like, what the victim was wearing, or any details only the killer would be privy to. You might be able to get him to reveal his knowledge by a simple slip of the tongue, but it's especially delicious when you can make him believe that he'll be in danger if he doesn't come out with the information. In the Columbo episode Short Fuse, our villain, Roger, rigs a cigar case with a bomb and puts it in his uncle's car, expecting it to be opened when his uncle is traversing a twisting mountain road. With any luck, the death will look like an accident, and that's more or less what happens, but with a few nagging details that tip off Lieutenant Columbo to the possibility of foul play. He figures out Roger's scheme, but without any proof, he has to set up a trap. He asks Roger to accompany him on a cable car to inspect the crash site one more time, and that's when he pulls out a cigar box, identical to the one booby-trapped by Roger. He claims that it was found unopened at the crash site. The bomb won't go off until the case is open, so now Roger is sure that his uncle's death really was a car accident, and more importantly, that he's trapped in a small space with a bomb that could go off at any minute. Finally, he can't take it anymore and tries to hurl the box out of the car, only to realize he's been had. So here, he's admitted to knowing something he shouldn't, namely that his uncle's cigar box was booby-trapped. Typically, in a mystery, the villain is trying to maintain several narratives, that is, lies, that sustain his appearance of innocence. For example, one of Roger's narratives is, I didn't know about the cigar bomb, and as soon as that narrative is broken, the illusion of his innocence goes with it. Another narrative villains often try to maintain is an alibi. That is a story about where they were when the crime was committed. And by destroying this alibi, we can make their guilt known to all. Tactic number 2, make the villain want to confess. Now, that might sound hard, but actually it's not impossible. If the villain confesses, yes, he'll go to jail, but most people do have a few things they value over their freedom. For example, they may value their family members. In an episode of Columbo called Mind Over Mayhem, Columbo makes the villain think that his son is about to be convicted of the crime. The only way he can stop this from happening is by coming clean. People also tend to value their life over their freedom, and I've seen this form of the sleuth's trap work when the sleuth manages to convince the villain that he's about to become the target of a revenge killing if he doesn't get somewhere nice and secure, like, say, a jail cell, pretty darn quick. As long as you can make the villain think that confessing is the better of two very bad options, you can force him to admit his guilt. Now, let's talk for a second about why your sleuth needs to use a trap in the first place. Well, often you'd use the trap in books where your sleuth has what I call story proof, that is, proof that satisfies the sleuth and the readers, but he's lacking legal proof, that is, proof that would satisfy a court. Story proof might consist of a preponderance of circumstantial evidence. If a suspect wears the same distinctive lipstick as the villain, has the same unusual skill set used during the murder, and has the best motive going, that might be enough to convince him that she's the villain. Story proof also might entail a glaring emotional tip-off, such as a bereaved husband who doesn't seem to miss his wife at all, or a suspect who seems entirely too nervous during the investigation. But by far, my favorite form of story proof is where the sleuth has seen legal proof, but it's been lost or destroyed, as in The Great Muppet Caper, where our heroes develop a photograph that catches the thief red-handed, but it's obliterated when someone opens the darkroom door before it's fully developed. In contrast to story proof, the standard for legal proof is much tighter. To reach this evidentiary standard, your sleuth is going to need to tie the killer to the actual event of the murder through physical evidence, witness statements, revealing knowledge, or the breaking of a crucial narrative upon which the villain has staked his entire story. If he's got the story proof but not the legal, he may be in a position where a sleuth's trap is just what he needs. If you feel like this video is giving you a good idea of how to construct a sleuth's trap for your book, I'd appreciate it a lot if you could smash that little like button and let YouTube know that this video is giving you value. And then let's talk about what may be my favorite way to construct the sleuth trap. Make the killer think he's in an evidence race. Okay. An evidence race. An evidence race is when both the sleuth and the villain are aware that there's a particular piece of evidence out there, and whoever gets to it first is going to win this game of cat and mouse. In an episode of Columbo called Double Exposure, Columbo is certain the crucial piece of evidence, a calibration converter that was used during the shooting, must be hidden somewhere in the villain's office. Trouble is, he doesn't have a warrant and the item is very well hidden. He takes pictures of himself in various positions around the room, then introduces them in split-second cuts to a movie being watched by the villain, implanting the idea that Columbo is zeroing in on the evidence. The villain panics and goes to secure the evidence, and by doing so, he points Columbo to exactly where he hid it. Okay, that's an example where the villain actually exposed the missing evidence by falling for the old evidence race trap. Another way to work this trap is simply by allowing the villain's actions in undertaking the evidence race to expose his guilt. In another episode of Columbo called Death Lends a Hand, Columbo actually goes as far as exhuming the body and lets the villain, and yes, this is the same actor from Double Exposure, don't let it bother you, totally different character. Columbo lets the villain know that the victim's body is missing a contact lens. This panics the villain because if that lens is found in a location that is tied to him, in his home where the murder occurred, or in his car which he used to transport the body, it's gonna be impossible to explain. He jumps into the evidence race, searching frantically for the contact lens, and that's how the police find him, in his car trunk, retrieving a contact lens. Columbo admits that this lens was a plant and that the body wasn't missing a lens at all. This is a case where there was no physical evidence to be found, but the killer's actions provide the proof of his guilt. This is an especially good trap to use if the sleuth isn't exactly sure who the bad guy really is. He can simply announce the evidence race to a large group of suspects, then wait to see who takes the bait. Another awesome way to spring a sleuth's trap is by getting the villain to attack the sleuth. In an episode of Murder, She Wrote called My Johnny Lies Over the Ocean, Jessica Fletcher has figured out who killed someone on a cruise ship, but she has flimsy evidence and a very short window of time before the villain will be off the ship and beyond her reach. Okay, so this is another reason why your sleuth may decide that a sleuth trap is her best course of action. Once the villain gets off the ship, any number of things may happen, right? He may go to another country from which it could be difficult to extradite him. He might assume a second identity, or he might begin destroying or fabricating evidence. Jess has to nail him for the crime now. So she comes to him pretending to be drunk and slinging accusations until he decides that the safest course of action is to commit one more little murder. Fortunately, Jess had enlisted help so that she was never in danger and the villain is fairly caught. We've got one last way to execute the sleuth trap, and it's what you do when your sleuth has nothing. You break the villain down with a bluff. This was a tactic that was often used in the old Perry Mason show. Anyone remember that one? Perry was a defense lawyer who was frequently investigating cases as they were ongoing to find out who the actual culprit was so that his client could be exonerated. Sometimes the evidence simply wouldn't come through, and in that case, Perry would just pretend he had the evidence after all. Here he pretends to read some damning evidence from a blank piece of paper, like a boss, until the witness cracks and gives everything away. Truth be told, the sleuth's trap usually comes at the end of what is a delightful game of cat and mouse between your villain and your sleuth. If you want to create that game, that thrilling back and forth of crime and detection, I can't do better than recommend this video. It's where I talked all about how to create your villain's cover-up, that is, his strategy for getting away with murder.